Hello, everybody. Hi, super excited to be here. I've been asked to talk about my personal experience of turning my design studio into a design engineering studio that ships and owns design systems in code. I haven't flown across the Atlantic Ocean to come here to talk about AI, even though these slides may make it seem like it. Between you and I, I'm kind of sick of AI, honestly, and just the Uber ride here from the airport, like watching all those billboards, that's insane. However, the technology, AI as a tool, is a catalyst for us as designers, for our industry, and for my studio too, to move upstream, to take more ownership of things. My name is Frederick. I run a 9-person design studio back in Copenhagen. Most of our design team push to client repos today. I haven't forced anybody to do this, by the way. I've created the opportunity for them to move in that direction. However, as you all know, the work we've been doing for a while now has kind of been moving in that direction, even before AI. From a business POV, as a design studio, there's a huge commercial upside for us to own design system work and move closer to code as designer. But I took this risk, I moved in this direction because of more personal reasons. And I'll start with that first. 12 years. That's how long I've watched really careful design work get butchered in implementation. And that just sounds a bit rough. My coworkers or my own design work, not by bad developers, not by ill intentions, but by a gap I'd accepted as just normal, cost of doing business. We'd spend months getting something right, and it would ship looking just, a bit wrong. I called it a communication issue. I called it a Figma annotation issue, but it wasn't. It was a structural issue. And what I've come to realize, at least, is that the person who cares about the detail is not the person who implements said details. 8 months into, just to give you a bit of behind the scenes of my studio, 8 months into most client relationship, the hardest work for us was sort of done. Like we'd architected the systems, we'd redesigned their products. After that, we were just sort of on the outside looking in. We'd see certain things get pulled apart. It wasn't the engineer's fault on their own, and we weren't there to govern it. Decisions were made in isolation. Stakeholders give feedback way too late sometimes, but that's where I saw the opportunity. I saw the opportunity that if my designers could gain the trust of our clients to get access to our clients' code base, we could own the design system. We could quality assure things. We could take ownership of component decisions. We'd be able to keep the integrity of our design work, essentially. The relationship would also be stronger because we would all of a sudden be able to take ownership of quality, the output of what we care so much about, what ends up in the user's hands. And engineers, from my perspective at least, would be freed up to do way more important stuff, innovative stuff. That's a win-win-win situation. And in case you were wondering, yes, every quarter for the last 5 years of having this agency, this studio, I've been thinking about hiring my own developers in-house. I haven't done that, though. They would have the same taste as us. They would be sitting next to the designers who made the decisions. We would have control of the output. Agencies I've looked up to for decades, Fantasy, MetaLab, Ueno, great teams have done it this way with great success. But I also knew what would happen next. The engineering headcount would probably start to grow a bit, usually by demand. Then it would outgrow the design team that I originally set out to build. And suddenly I'm running a development agency with a design function attached. And for me, personally, that simply wasn't what I wanted to do. AI, as a tool, changed that. Not because it makes coding easier, although it obviously does, we all know this, but because it changed the timeline. Now stick with me here, because this comes from my own mind. 2 years ago, a product designer shipping production code or maintaining a design system, that would be a career change. Completely, like back to school, courses, late night learning. Now, it means 2 to 4 months of just focused work under the right conditions, and the conditions are super crucial. I'll get back to this. I'm not interested. I don't know how many engineers is in this audience, but I'm not interested in getting jumped by them after this talk. So I just want to clarify that AI have not made anybody, a design engineer or a design system architect like from day one. It requires exposure, extensive training. That's what we've been going through. Like you need architectural instinct. You need a DOM understanding. You need to be able to direct a tool and not be directed by it. Prompt engineering, super important. AI sped up the timeline It did not move any bars, for quality. Regardless, the opportunity enabled us as a design studio to essentially stop handoffs. We started building, we started shipping. We stopped being a vendor that simply delivers, and we became what engineers build on top of. That's crazy. That's still crazy to me. So if you're unaware that this is a possibility, even after today, after all these great talks we had, I'm here to tell you that it's not. It's right now. And it starts with design system ownership in code. We as designers can have a much larger integral impact on important product features if we own the design system. We're all in different situations, both in here and online. I'm here to show you how a small Copenhagen-based design studio did it, but whether you're a Fortune 500 design director or a chief design officer, freelancer even, this playbook remains the same. And it starts with one designer and the right conditions. The key is picking one person, not a team, not your entire organization, one person. And for me, that was Modestus. He's in the crowd somewhere here, so you should find him and talk to him later. To give you some context, over there right here, I hired him 3 years earlier to replace me in Figma. I had to run a studio. 3 reasons why I picked him. He was organized, detail-obsessed, and curious about code. All wonderful traits to find in a designer. But personality wasn't enough, unfortunately. He also had 4 slightly underdeveloped skills, capabilities that I needed for this to work. Or so I thought. He thought architecturally, a component lived inside a system in his head, not on a page in Figma, not on the canvas. He thought about how his work would be consumed downstream by developers. We saw that in, nice Figma files, good handoffs. Developers actually wanted to consume his work. He had basic DOM understanding from working with developers previously, and like anybody in this room, he could learn how to prompt. Not type into a chat box prompt, but direct a tool prompt. There's a big, big distinction here. A quick note on perfectionism, because I know a lot of people in this room probably have it. This will speed up the learning process, big time, but you need to manage it. Modestus was and still is super defensive about his ideas. He's super proud. He wants to impress. He's a good old-fashioned perfectionist. I love that about him because I'm very similar. But as a leader, those traits are important to notice because you need to design around them. Good traits can pose as negatives, when you're moving people to a different place or changing their career essentially from design to engineering. I expected this perfectionism would slow him down because I knew for myself that would paralyze me if I all of a sudden had to, go from a Figma canvas to make design system architectural decision that would last a long time in code. Early on, I did not need polish. I just needed momentum. That's why I told Modestus early on that I expect mistakes. I expect us to look back on this work in the next upcoming weeks and, be embarrassed by it. That's the signal that what we're doing here is working. Imposter syndrome is very prevalent among me, you, all of us. If you sprinkle a bit of design system architecture on top of that, you have a lethal mixture. So you, as a leader, need to name it before they do. Modestus was down for a challenge. So before we moved on, I time-boxed 1 week. This seems simple, but it was really good. I removed everything from his calendar, gave him 1 week. I handed him a B2B SaaS UI. I know you guys love this over here. B2B SaaS UI that we had designed in Figma. It was fully spec'd. It was ready to go. Never shipped, never coded. It was just staying in Figma. I had some expectations. They were quite simple. I wanted him to extract the components. I wanted him to build the initial storybook setup. I wanted him to make it real. Mind you, he'd never built a production component library before, and I wasn't testing whether he could do that cleanly. That would be foolish at this point. I was testing whether he could, under the circumstances, under a bit of time pressure, being uncomfortable, lift those capabilities, those 4 capabilities I just mentioned before. This is what we had at the end of the week. Storybook running, components separated, working in a browser, not in a Figma file. That was a big step. He read his way into, half of it and, messed around and figured things out as he went along. Some of it was rough, some of it was over-engineered, none of it was finished by any means. But the 4 capabilities I was looking for was all in there. That was enough for me to fully commit. We moved on to something a bit more fun, which was billable work after this. But before I mention that, I got to share you how certain things needed to line up before we made that decision. The studio absorb the cost of him learning on the job, obviously. He's got to be able to go at his own pace. It's super important. You cannot rush this stuff. We bought a design system course to strengthen architectural decisions and get some terminology going both internally and externally. And as corny as this may sound, trust was a huge part of this. He started prototyping his design in code on his own without my mandate because he thought that was a better medium to express his design work. That's trust. I had a very quick, clear aha moment shortly after the initial test. Modestus has designed something in Figma. I think it was a complex chart component, and we were told it was unbuildable. This is not possible. Modestus asked what kind of JavaScript framework the developers were using. He coded it in Cursor, prototyped it, and he walked the developers through his implementation. Turns out it wasn't that unbuildable after all. And that was like, okay, this is the right thing for us to do. Truly one of the most important things I did, and also one of the simplest. I dedicated 15 minutes of my own time every day. I called it a design engineering sync. It was 2 p.m., and it was a daily deadline, essentially. Individual contributors, from my experience, can, without a clear horizon, can disappear into problems and, perfectionism. And the sync gave us a reason to surface, to talk. Sometimes we talk for 5 minutes, sometimes we talk for hours. Doesn't matter, but it was there. Then, I put him in engineering meetings. This was the scariest room I could think of, representing engineering meetings at that point in time. Great movie, too. In the start, the meetings was uncomfortable for both of us because it was all brand new. We had architecture talks, we had planning sessions, rooms where we did not have all the answers yet. The instinct most leaders have here is to protect, smooth the path, which is a good instinct, and I agree with that. But initially here, the only thing I protected Modestus from was one thing, and that was being publicly exposed by engineers in these meetings before he had the language to hold his own. There's a sentence I used in these rooms. We'll circle back to you on that. We need to weigh our options. That's a complete answer. Requires no apology, shows process, not ignorance, and you really cannot be ignorant when you're moving from design to engineering. You need to find your version of this because it will happen. Modestus watched me use this sentence initially. He started using it himself, and at this point, he doesn't need it anymore. This goes without saying, but for all my leaders in this room, in such a drastic transformation that is moving a designer to become more engineering-led, there's a difference between protecting them from shame and protecting them from struggle. Struggle is a good thing. Struggle is how we all grow. Contemplating how, we made the wrong architectural decision 2 weeks too late, that sucks, but it's growth. The late nights reading Reddit threads about what Angular framework to use for your next cross-platform mobile application, I'm sure that sucks, but it's growth, and it's really good. Shame, however, is how people stop growing. Looking stupid in a Zoom call full of engineers. Kills any momentum, kills any growth you've grown with this person. You gotta intervene on the shame, and you gotta stay out of the struggle. The struggle is good. Back to the timeline. By October, we shipped our first design system with downstream developers consuming our work. In code. Big deal. It was the initial building blocks, the foundation, the semantic tokens, the primitive components, all this jazz. We even built a feature using our own NPM package. That's crazy. Our own NPM package. It was an invoicing module, fake logic, but it was their developers, PropMiner, our clients' developers, would hook it up to their own API. Separation of concerns, just how we wanted it. It was really good, and it created the goodwill we needed as a design studio to be able to take more ownership of engineering. Later, same year, in December, we had to extend, restructure slightly the storybook we built because PropMiner wanted us to make a mobile application for them. Shows what we were doing was working. That foundation, those mobile components, all those architectural choices now runs a handful of white label apps in production. Built off the work one designer did in his first 5 months of transitioning into a design engineering role. A designer built this. And at this point, many designers have built this, actually. Super, super exciting. At this point, I started seeing things at the office, culturally, things were happening. I first saw it in our Friday design reviews. The whole studio looks at work in progress together. Modestas had already started bringing his components, his code, his storybook to these design review meetings. He brought code, and we started to see the why and what we were doing clicking in the eyes of everybody in the studio. Design engineering and design system work started to become a topic in our personal development conversations. First time it happened, a designer asked me in our one-on-one, hey, Frederick, I want to do what Modestas is doing. How can we make this happen? At this point, Modestas had already done the hard part of showing everybody that you as a designer can transition into something potentially, for them, more meaningful. You could take more ownership of things. The empowerment was flowing through our team. And to capitalize on this, I planned for Modestas to speak to his colleagues. We were heading on our annual retreat in October anyway at this point, so it was perfect timing. Not only did I communicate on this annual retreat that us as a design studio in the next year would be, our core services would become design engineering and design system ownership, which just sounds insane. But I also asked Modestas to present. It wasn't a status update, it was a real talk about what design engineering is and what it unlocks for a designer, for our industry. He stood in front of his colleagues who had watched him be uncomfortable and very deep in his work for months, and he shared his optimism that this is the future. Like, this is the future for us as designers. For me, and this seems obvious, but for me, the same talk would have been an instruction. But from Modestas, a guy people trusted, it was an offer. Believe it or not, people don't move passionately in any direction, especially not a career change, just because their boss tells them that this new thing over here, AI, is great. They move when somebody they trust, like Modestas, shows them what is possible. This is also important to say, because the honest version is that not everybody in my team have asked to do this transition. Some are juniors who want to deepen their product design craft, and that comes first. That's super important. Some people are still cautious about this whole thing, and I get that. But Modestas is part of, when they get there, they get there. Half of my designers ship code today. The other half does equally important work. The future of our industry, does not require everybody to transition into this. Not at all. 12 months ago, Modestas was, quote-unquote, only making pixels in Figma. Really good pixels. But today, the design systems he built is consumed by developers across 3 continents. That's not a job change. That's a completely different person doing completely different work in a very short amount of time. And as a leader, watching this happen has been one of the most rewarding things that I've done in the 5 years of running the studio. And I truly believe that you get to experience that too. Quickly, here's how it looks. Just a screenshot from a Git repository. 3 designers from a team pushing stuff into our client's code base. This seemed impossible and insane not that long ago. And this number still surprising me. We had to double check this a few times before we flew over here. 84% of production code in one of our clients' projects is built by designer. We have a design system component coverage that is sky high. We have that ownership. We have that quality. For most of the code base that we're in, and the one I just mentioned, the line between designer and engineer isn't just blurred, it's completely removed. And that's design engineering to me. That makes me so excited. I run a small studio, no scale, no famous name. Outcome is what I sell, what actually ships, what actually moves our client's business forward. Design engineering is what let me build the studio I always dreamed of in terms of craft. One where the gap between what we intended as designers in Figma and what ships is as small as we can possibly make it. The commercial upside is real, but that's not why I made the bet. I took the risk because the work I wanted to make as a design studio simply wasn't possible any other way. And I'm here to tell you that design needs to own the code. Whether that's your organization's design system or the front-end implementation of an integral part of your product experience, you guys need to own the code. Design needs to move upstream. If you lead a design team, I'll leave you with this. If you lead a design team, next Monday, pick the designer who cares and who shares similar capabilities and interests as Modestas, hand them a UI ready for implementation, give them a week to build it, get out of their way. Don't force your entire organization to chase this shiny new thing over here. It will backfire. And if you're a designer in this room thinking, my leader will never move on this, I won't get the opportunity, you've got to start anyway. The skills that you build now will compound, like from a decade from now. This is the thing you need to focus on. Monday, set up your LLM of your choice. Get started with Figma MCP. Ask a developer you trust in your team for access to their code base. Fix something small or build something new you just designed in Figma. Ideally using the components from your storybook or component library. Your developers will love you for that. Be curious. Ask why. The skills that you acquire now will compound. You don't need permission to start. Finally, for the leaders in this room, I've written down some thoughts in a more extended version than I can present in 20 minutes. The day-to-day, the decision-making, the commercial impact. You can download it here or find me or my team roaming around for the rest of the week. We'd love to chat, share you a link. Thank you very much.